And most of the hour with Steve Crevier, six-time Canadian Superbike champion. Get an update as to where he is right now and go back and talk about an amazing career, as well as the fact that his good friend Daryl Fletcher has nominated him for induction into the British Columbia Motorsport Hall of Fame, or Sports Hall of Fame, pardon me.
Yeah, I believe
of course, couple of years ago, Steve was inducted into the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame. I had the honor of going out there to MC that. So without further ado, Stuart Nodell, let's take a look at this past weekend.
Yeah, sure, Pat. Looking at this past weekend, we had the Moto America race, SOAR raced, as well as World Superbike events. And by all accounts, I guess I'll let Ken get into the SOAR event, but by all accounts, they had a great crowd again. The racing was really good. It was competitive. And overall, I think they had a successful weekend. I know from others that I talked to that participated, they had a great time. So that's hats off to those guys. I don't have any of the notable results. I did catch Saturday's qualifying results, and Elliot Vieira, again, was on pole for the 600 sport bike race. So he seems to continue being successful.
Well, he was fast in the qualifying heat, Stuart, but he had some motor problems on Sunday and wasn't able to finish the race. So that's really tightened up the Sport Bike Championship. We'll get into more of that with Ken McAdam when he's on here in a few minutes.
Okay, awesome.
Moto America at the brand new Ridge Circuit. That could become a venue where British Columbia racers might end up racing quite a bit. We'll talk to Steve Crevier about that. And of course, for Canadian fans, we've been focused on how 19-year-old Alex Dumas is doing in the Stock 1000 Championship. He's been finishing on the podium the last couple of rounds consistently, but unfortunately, Stuart, he was involved in a crash on Saturday at the Ridge that put him out of the lone Stock 1000 race that ran on Sunday.
Yeah, that's right, Pat. He was in actually the Superbike Leg 1 on Saturday, and there was quite a big pile up in turn 1. They have a chicane that enters or exits corner 1. And unfortunately, Alex got caught up in that. And from what I could tell, he was up and walking away from the incident, but definitely favoring one of his arms. So he may have an injury that forced him out of action for Sunday's feature event for him in the Stock 1000 class, which Cameron Peterson dominated that race again from start to finish.
Yeah, that's a tight championship there going on between Corey Alexander, Cameron Peterson, Gilbert is also in there. That'll probably go down to the final round, but got a quick update on Alex Dumas just before we came on. From one of my sources, apparently the issue with Alex is his elbow. He apparently has broken something in there and he might need surgery, but I'm not sure if we're going to see him at New Jersey. That's the next stop for Moto America. That'll be on the 12th and 13th weekend at New Jersey Motorsport Park. So tough break for the young Canadian rider who, of course, 2 years ago won the Junior Cup. Last year he won the Moto America Twins Championship and was in the hunt for the Stock 1000 title. But I think that incident at the Ridge, I think, has pretty much ended his championship aspirations. Stuart, World Superbike continues to motor along, dealing with COVID-19 as all series are the best they can.
Yeah, that's right, Pat. So the World Superbikes were racing this past weekend, and at their event, they were at Aragon in Spain. Scott Redding won the first leg on the Ducati, and he was followed by Chaz Davies, his teammate, in second, and Jonathan Ray finished third on the Kawasaki. And on Sunday's second leg, Jonathan Ray did take the victory over Chaz Davies, who finished second, and Scott Redding was bumped down to fourth. And Honda's effort with Alvaro Bautista got their first podium of the year.
Okay. Anything else on the results front, Stuart?
I think that's about it. Just in World Superbike, it's basically a two-horse race between Redding and Ray, and Ray's got a 10-point advantage over him. But other than that, they're pretty clear from the balance of the field.
And of course, coming up this weekend, there's some vintage racing going on in both the United States and here in Ontario. The VRRA, which has not run an event, all of their events that were scheduled have been canceled, but they've got their lone event coming up this weekend at Shannonville Motorsport Park, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Of course, many of their competitors are in that 60 plus age demo, and it'll be interesting to see how many of those racers get out. Of course, at Shannonville, I was there a couple of weeks ago for the CTCC and CASC car race weekend. They do allow 100 fans, social distancing, you've got to wear the mask. They've got all the protocols in place. So we wish the BRRA all the best in their lone event coming up at Shannonville this weekend.
Yeah, the only other event to report on, Pat, was that the Barber Armour Vintage event is on for racing, but no festival. Just the participants racing is a go.
Well, that event traditionally, gathers just hundreds and hundreds of vintage competitors. Of course, the Barber Museum is there, and they've got all kinds of other events that are tied into that big celebration of vintage motorcycle road racing. The racing is going to go on, as you said, Stuart, but like so many events, without fans. And just one quick update. I spoke to Pat Barnes earlier today. He has officially canceled his entry for the Daytona 200, which is coming up October 17th at Daytona International Speedway. And also Alex Coelho, fine Quebec rider who had qualified for the 200. He also has canceled his entry. Didn't get an update on Darren James, but I doubt whether Darren is going to make the trek. The border is still closed, and he was that one rider that we really empathized with. He had just arrived the day before the first day of Daytona 200 qualifying, and then it all got canceled that first day, and he had a very long drive back to Vancouver. So off the top, we talked about SOAR. Let's bring in Ken McAdam, who's been doing a great job with the SOAR series. They had back-to-back weekends in June, their third round in July, and this past weekend, round 4. And Ken, did you break all entry levels in all of the various classes? What did you end up with in terms of total number of riders and entries for the weekend? Ken, you've got to unmute yourself.
Sorry.
There you go.
Am I there?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Now, to be honest, I don't know the exact numbers. I got home late this afternoon. I don't generally leave the track till Monday. So I'm not sure. We were well over 200. I'm not sure, if it's set any records or not. We've had strong entries in the past, but we're well up there. Everybody's looking forward to racing, and we seem to be the only game in town that's putting it together. So they're coming out in droves. I got people almost every day now that have never raced with us coming out to join in the fun. So we're doing it. It's coming together well. Our protocols have been lightened somewhat. We're still at the 100 spectators that we're allowed to have, and
Yeah. Well, a little bit of a technical difficulty. I guarantee you the weekend racing at Grand Bend Motorplex went a whole lot smoother than that internet connection that we had with Ken. So, Ken, we'll catch up with you a little bit later on this fall as you look ahead to rounds 5, and then, of course, round 6 wraps up that championship in October. An item we did touch on earlier in pro sport bike that's been hotly contested. I believe Chris Pletch, who is the son of James Pletch, talented rider. We used to announce his races back in the late 70s, early 80s at Shannonville. Chris is a talented young rider. He's leading the points, I believe. McRae on the Kawasaki is second, and then Elliot Vieira, who had qualified on the pole by winning the qualifying race in the wet on Saturday. He sits third in the championship, was a DNF on Sunday, some kind of a motor problem with the Yamaha. The team manager, Clive Nigakeen, I think they were headed to Gordy Bush to try to rebuild that engine and get ready for the round coming up in September. So,
Yeah,
Stuart,
I'm not sure. My back.
great to have you on. We had 13 times Canadian Superbike champion Jordan Zoke on a couple of times earlier in the summer. And it's high time we had the 6-time Canadian Superbike champion on Track Announcer's Notebook. First of all, how are you doing?
Doing good. I mean, it's been kind of a funny summer, you know, but the weather hasn't been stellar, a lot of mosquitoes. But, you know, the COVID things, it's caused, you know, with kids and everything, it's been hard to kind of get out and a little stir crazy, but things have been great. You know, like I'm doing good. And Lindsay's, you know, like being the mom she is, taking great care of the kids, and me doing what I do, not much.
Have you been out to Area 27? Because I know Ben Young was out there maybe a week ago for a track day. I know Darren James has been out there. Have you had a chance to ride at that racetrack?
Well, you know what? I think Ben Young was brought out by Patrick at OPP, I think, and for his track days. And, you know, I've not really been in touch this year with Patrick, but I got to ride his bikes last year. For the first time, I've actually ridden a sport bike on a racetrack since, you know, my last race in 2013. I was nervous, I was sketchy, but the track is, to ride, the track is awesome. It's fun, and, you know, I find it a little dangerous. But, you know, like every time we go to a national, we're just used to seeing more halos, more air fence. The track is stellar. Bit complicated with the pit entry and stuff like that. You know, to make viewing, it's not really a great viewer's track. Not, you know, maybe something to work on in the future. But what a great facility! What a great layout! What, you know, very challenging corners, flat turns, hilly turns, like just really great stuff. But again, you know, really kind of a weird pit entrance and stuff. Just leaves the crew just trying to guess what's going on out there. You know, like you watch the watch till the rider comes by for a second or two. Good work on those areas. But I haven't been there. And Darren and I were going to go out there, but I went away this weekend, and Darren and I were trying to do it a couple weeks ago, but I didn't get to ride the Beals with him. And he did go out and have some fun last weekend, but I got some texting to him, but I didn't get to speak to him yet. Let's find out how that went.
Steve, you mentioned Area 27. When I was out there a couple of years ago when you were inducted into the Canadian Motorcycle Hall of Fame, and that's sort of where I want to start. I took the trip out Westwood, but a lot of time had transpired. In fact, 28 years. Didn't really recognize the place. I sort of figured out where the golf clubhouse was, where the paddock was, and where the track went. But when you go up there, because I know you're not far from it where you're living now, that must bring back some very special memories, particularly those early years as an amateur racing at Westwood Motorsport Park.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny because I had some two uncles from Montreal, you know, the same city. My mom at Il Perot, St. Anne's, and their father, my grandfather, they would come out and take me up there when I was a kid. So it's everything I dreamed about. And, you know, like, you know, just kind of, we would leave there as being 10 or 12 years old, and we would ride across town with our Mustang bicycles, my brother Mike and I, and push up that damn hill and, you know, sneak in to try to get to watch it and stuff like that. And, you know, it was just so great. So now when I get up there and I see this golf course, you know, I pretty much start looking for a book of matches to light everything on fire up there. I want my racetrack back, you know, like, but it is hard to see. But if you get to the clubhouse, you can sort of look down on what would be like the front straight turn 2, I think. So it's very hard to make it out right now. But you can go online now, and they've overlapped like overlap the track, you know, the geography of the track on it. And it's almost impossible to figure it all out now. And there's pit lane, they call it pit lane, I think, condos. They've got a street name. There's a condo section there. It says pit lane. I think you can find it there. But Pat, you would not know there was a racetrack there, ever.
No, no, it was very difficult when I went up there a couple of years ago. Steve, take us back to those early years. 1985, you turn pro, your first pro year, and you've got a gentleman that was so instrumental throughout your career, Bill McLean with Pacific Yamaha. How did that relationship all come about?
Well, I was out of school early and working and everything, and I tried to go back to school, and that didn't work. And I really was too sore for motocross, you know, with sort of mid-back injuries. And, I bought an RZ 350 because I really wanted to, like have a street bike and stuff. But the problem with that is I got into like 5 accidents within 2 months. And the last one in Port Moody, rounding below the police station, rounding a corner, an off-duty policeman driving an old Maverick. He comes around this bend at, I can't remember, Rocky Point Marina or whatever. Yeah, anyways, I tucked the front end on a brand new tire and the bike went under the front of his car and then hit the curb and then teetered on the Armco, and I slid in my butt and then smashed my face into his car door. And he got out shaking and just freaking out and everything. And I was like, I was only just trying to see if the bike was okay, but I rode it off. And I had the frame straightened, and an ex-girlfriend of mine at the time had a boyfriend, Gary Parrish. I don't know if you can remember Gary Parrish, but
yeah.
She says, Gary's done good. He's got dirt bike. You really got to try it. And so, I got Gary Parrish to show me the ropes right away. And I got some practice nights. And I got some practice nights. And then I bent the bike up. And right before the first race, but on my first race, it was a rainy day. And we had New Zealand champ, Robert Holden, who was replacing Gary Goodfellow. Gary brought him up from New Zealand. Unfortunately, Holden succumbed to crash and passed away in the Isle of Man somewhat 15, 20 years ago. But Steve Dick, and then Brian Rolls, there were some actually really great names. And it was really competitive, but there was only like a dozen pros at the first race and the 30 amateurs. So they just graded me in the back row for my first race, and I finished 4th overall. And that was 1984. And then so when I started, and then we used to have the clubhouse before some rednecks burnt it down. So we go to the clubhouse in turn 2 and trophy presentations. And I remember like yesterday, and Alan Seddon, Englishman that's come over, he's been with the track since it's built. And Alan is there and he's got a check, like I came through motocross. I didn't make a damn thing, didn't know what contingency money was or nothing. And he's got a check for $185, my first race. And he says, if you got to take this check, like nobody's ever given me nothing. If I didn't take it or work for it, nothing's come my way easy. So even as an 18-year-old kid, so he's got this check and like he's waving at my face saying to me, like, you take this, you can't win an amateur championship. I looked at him square in the eyes. I says, if I'm fast enough to go with the pros, why not? Would I want to ride with the goddamn amateurs? Like, I want to be a pro. Like, why would you want to say, but I was that aggressive. And I thought he was trying to screw me. Now, all that being said, I felt a little guilty about that pretty much my whole life. And then I was at Doug Stevens' shop, Mile Zero on the island, on Vancouver Island. And that was like last year or 2 years ago. We always go to the island to vacation. And this old guy rolls in, this Englishman, and Alan said it. And I was like, oh my goodness, Alan, I got to apologize to you for, he says, Steve, he says, I was in racing a long time. He got to ride the Isle of Man and all that, blah, blah, blah. He says, I knew where you were. He says, you're aggressive. And if you'd lived long enough, you'd be something in racing. And he says, I just had to let it go because that's just, how aggressive and everything. But I just hated myself for it. But I got to apologize, and he didn't need it. But Alan was a great guy. Is a great guy. He's still with us. So quite a funny story. So I did I had missed one round in the 9-race series, and I went to my grandparents' 50th anniversary in Montreal. But I did win Pro 600 and tied first for like modified. So with the help of Darryl Michaels and Stephen Wyatt, and that season I did go to Bill McLean, which I did buy the bikes, knocked on the door, and I says, like that year I got help right away with Pacific Yamaha, because I knocked on the door and I said, you got Kevin McDermott and Roddy Morris were two riders on RZ350s. And I says, I don't want to push them out, but I beat them, and I could beat them every time. And I don't want to push them away, but if I get a better deal on parts, than what Checkpoint was giving me with, I says, I'll call you a sponsor. And so he says, very good. But Billy was exporting a lot of bikes for Yamaha. And the very next year, they came up with a 1985 FZ 750. And they got me one of those like immediately. And I've never ridden a 4-stroke mini dirt bike or anything. So I didn't have a clue how to ride it. But that's how it all started with Pac-Yam. That's how I started. And, no amateur day, not one day. That's, you don't realize at the time what you're doing, but you're really doing something.
So, Steve, 1985, your first pro season. You're one of the top guys there at Westwood. The National Series comes out there every year as part of the Western Swing, and we're going to skip ahead a couple of years. 1989, you had that dream season, not only winning Superbike, you won 600 production, I guess it was called at the time. And this is connection back to Frank Ciampini, who, with a little bit of help from me, brought those two Aprilias over. Jonathan Cornwell rode one. You rode one. You beat Cornwell for the championship. And that is because 250 has gone by the wayside. But how challenging and difficult was that 89 season? And you did a lot of racing and riding where you won all three of those championships.
How difficult was it with dealing with Steve Wyatt all year?
Oh, okay. That was the problem.
I remember one time, I always bring it up, the one time I'm trying to drive back west for the races, and Rick Hobbs and Steve, and, we were pretty early, and they got into some stuff, and they pissed me off so much in Wyoming. I literally shut the vehicle down and I threw him out of the damn truck somewhere in the middle of Wyoming. And I was so mad they're just laughing at me. But anyways, it was a lot of fun. That was a really hard year for me because, everything was a little bit up in the air, and, we got our Q107 bike, thanks Pat, and, not much time to ride it. And, we were a bit shoved in a corner at McBride's shop. So, because Rick Hobbs was working there at the time. And, Billy said, well, here, why don't you ride the 600? We got, Yamaha still helping us. We got a 600, just ride it. Cause I okay, can I put it in the truck? And, it ended up, I had to share a lot of expenses that year on keeping that team running. Something that wasn't originally in the deal, but it was a very stressful year because I had so much stress the year before. In '88, I decided I was probably going to retire, and I was racing the 250s in the States to see if I can learn more and do things, but I wouldn't let anybody modify the engine, nothing, because you can't make money if you don't finish. And back then, there was always a bit of prize money, so privateer could exist, a little bit different than now. So I did learn a lot, and going into '89, I just simply said, I'm not going to listen to nobody about nothing, just listen to myself, what I got to get done. And Billy at Pacific Yamaha, Tom Tire, Bill McLean, Tom Tire, they got an OW01 Yamaha 750 for me. And I got to ride it a little bit around Steve's, where he lived rurally out in Wannock, Maple Ridge. And it just seemed to starve for air. And, we made an airbox. We know there's a kit airbox available, but we didn't have one kit part. We didn't have a foot peg, a kit, anything. The bike was a complete production bike, except for this airbox we built, which first test we did at, the cold ports out in Swanson, where it was bogging, and I thought we had too much pressure in there, and then I drilled some holes in the bottom and put a hood, a kitchen vent hood screen across the top of the carburetors. That's the way we raced it all year. And then I had a set of Marchesinis. I guess that was all we could do to that bike. Didn't crash it all year, I guess, at the races at all, because we didn't have any parts. We did blow a motor at Mossport, and there was a gentleman named Max Suzuki worked at Yamaha that got us an engine. So without that, I wouldn't be able to finish my championships. And, I wouldn't have done, like what I really needed to accomplish. The thing that eluded me was I felt I was always quick at Westwood. When we went to that race, it was a screwed up, wet weekend. Points were important. I really wanted that lap record. I wanted to close that track with a lap record. I knew it was coming to a close, and that was a bike I could do it on, but it just never happened. And so that year was really tough. But to cap it all off, I was just, sleeping in a chair, sitting up because of gastrointestinal damage, because of all this stress, the racing, not sleeping. Life was coming pretty fast and real hard back then. Then we go to Mexico City, and I enter, it was a World Superbike Invitational, and to top everything up, I got Billy down there, which was a great trip, and Steve Wyatt too. But before we left on that trip, I went out, I had Steve pull the motor apart because I felt it vibrate too much. So he balanced the crank and the rods and the pistons and put it together. I mean, it felt really good. And I was going to go down the road, the big 4.5K loop, and just kind of go down the road, turn around, come back. But he says, aren't you going to put a helmet on? I says, well, are you going to wire my brake pits and put the lower fairing on? He says, put the freaking helmet on. I put a helmet on, a jacket, my cowboy boots. I go up for the big lap. I go past his driveway because he lives on the corner of this T intersection along this ravine. I go 5 gears off, like head east towards the golf course. I come back, 5 gears hard, and then I'm going to do this big ass brakey in front of them. And I go to hit it. There's no brakes. And, rear brake slides, so the engine's dead stops. And as I'm going by, and I got Steve's helmet barely, fitting my face because I got a big head. And I yell, Wyatt! And his brother Jerry, and sadly, Jerry just passed away a few months ago. But anyways, they turn around the driveway as I'm passing by. But in my head, I got to low side this bike, because if there's a cars coming up and down that ravine road, I don't want to, be in that car. So I go to, and plus, I don't know what's at the end. There's the big maple trees, the no road sign. And I thought, this is death. You're going to die. And so I try to low side this bike, and good plan, but when you're not really turning, low siding is really hard to do, unless it's like in the movies and you're doing 40 miles an hour, but I'm still doing, 70 miles an hour by this time, whatever. And it hooks up, the bike steps out, hooks up, and it launches me over the road. And I go over the road, and I didn't know, into the abyss. I had no idea. And I land down the transition, because, as they build roads, you push the gravel off and all the fir trees and everything, just as if I landed in Mother Teresa's hands without a mark on my body, as the bike did as well, and went into the ravine. We pull it out, and there's barely anything wrong with it. But unfortunately, Steve had crapped his pants, and it put a thing into him where he realized that I was going good, but he's limited to where we could go. And that was a point. I took him to Mexico to do that World Superbike race, and we got a third, and then we beat Poland on the Yoshi Suzuki's for a win, which is still incredible because it's a complete production bike against all those world bikes with Reimer and Parvano in Italy, and all these guys had these full works Yamahas. It was a great achievement, but even the flight out there, the bike went with Steve, and Steve in the plane, they had to jettison the fuel at Aero Mexico and emergency land that plane. So he was just admittingly saying he can't help, he feels it would be better if we don't do it anymore because his nerves were just shot. But every day with him is just hilarious. Like in '88, I go to Calgary to ride the National, and he says, you're going to come in and you can only get one change, Steve. You're going to come in for testing, one change. And I'm like, oh shit, because I can, change 3 or 4 things and still dissect everything, like a lot going on in my head. So I come in there and it's like, like damn forks are bottoming up bad, you got to work on that first. And the altitude's always something in, the altitude in Calgary. You lose power, you got to jet that. I come in and I've got all this shit stuff in my mind. And I say to Steve, I says, well, the first thing we got to do is we got to change fork springs. We got to make it stiffer. And Steve says, well, which spring do you want to change, the left one or the right one? Not a every day was just the stupid one-liners and the shenanigans. It was fun. But in '89, when everything coming together for me, I was duly ill with gastrointestinal problems, and that just kind of made me realize just how intense I was after going to the doctors and having some talks about that. So, but yeah, good stuff. Exciting.
Yeah. Steve, so that was a great win against the best world superbike riders in Mexico to cap off that season. And when we come back, because I'm going to go to Stuart and Odell, because I think we've got a couple of questions for some of the folks who have joined us tonight. So Stuart, what questions are there for Steve?
Well, Pat, thanks. We've had Henry DeGau's with us tonight, so I'm sure Steve remembers Henry.
Holy cow, it's Henry DeGau. God, I love his goats. He's got goats.
And he said he has so many questions for Steve, but he's just going to narrow it down to a few. And he just wanted to ask Steve his recollections of the late Donald Jacks, as well as
smiley
racing in Macau.
guy, just always, yeah. You know what? I know, I think Donald lived really close to Henry in Florida, and the one thing is Henry DeGau really helped bring Donald into the racing and everything. And Donald was just, he had a great ability to ride. He had a good ride, with Yosh and everything. And, he was also a street rider and everything. And just it's just a Florida kid, I think around the Orlando area, I think. But Donald was just always happy, and when I would win a race, lose a race, I'm always thinking about the next. I'm always aggressive and kind of, it took me a lot of years to, when you do a race to even say thanks. But a guy like Donald, don't you get mad? Don't you get angry? And he never did. I mean, he's just a lovely person. Too tall. I don't like tall people. But anyways, he was a good, wiry, kid. And, I don't even really understand the circumstance of his passing so much. It's kind of a crazy situation from what I hear. But it just was shocking, because racetracks, kind of back in the day, there was a lot of, I was getting used to a lot of fatalities. I witnessed quite a few in the first 3 races I entered. It was understandable. But, with Donald, I just didn't get to understand, street bike stuff always scares me a bit, and it was just one of those crazy things. Lovable guy, and Henry, I don't know. Yeah, and Henry's awesome because Henry DeGau will send you to Macau, and that's he's so much fun in racing. He was always a great promoter in Florida, and the Macau thing for all the years that he's done it. You just got to say thanks, except for Michael Taylor. I let him fill my spot that one year, and he got smashed up really bad. I said, just go and have fun. Don't try so bloody hard, but Michael got hurt. But yeah, Henry DeGau, Donald Jacks, they were like that, and everyone misses Donald. You get on Ryan's Road Racing World, and he always brings him up all the time, because Ryan was a kid back then, when his father Steve was racing. Ryan Knowles, right, Pat?
And Stuart, a couple other questions there from Henry of Steve.
Yeah, just the next question would be, what did Steve think about his racing adventure in Macau?
You know what? I loved it. It's dangerous. Yeah, we took kind of a box stock. We had a stock superbike, what do you call I don't know, it's CBR 1000 Honda. I should know these things. But anyways, we took that and we had to take a Suzuki front end, and the tires were 16 and a half and Pirellis. I had no experience with these things. So I didn't like that too much because I couldn't really get the feel on the front end and the brakes were lagging. Not a good place to have these kind of things. And, you know, a really bad moment was I came into pit and looked up the board right away because I knew, you know, Stephen Mertens was behind me. And Stephen was playing with a Frenchman. I only got to know once, I think in 2005. I took Scotty, you know, the Diablo crew, Scotty, I can't remember. But I looked up at the monitors and, you know, as I looked up, you go pit out and it's a 4-lane highway, all air-cooled right-handed corner, and it's kind of crowned in the middle. So when you're taking that corner at 140 miles an hour or whatever, you got to kind of turn in on the lanes you're in. But as you get to the center of the road, you got to make sure you're going to put that bike up a little bit, you know. And I looked up and Mertens was playing with this French endurance racer guy. I can't remember his name. But, you know, being there with his children and everything, and he tucked the front, and sadly he went into the wall. And, you know, that put a damper on things because he, you know, he didn't, you know, he succumbed to injuries and passed. And so, you know, that kind of put a damper on it. But as the race went on, and all the oil from all the cars and all the carnage and everything, the track was treacherous. It was fun as hell. I mean, I loved it. It's just that I couldn't brake really well. And I couldn't steer really good, and I ended up running wide, and I had to hit a wall. And I thought about it's one of these tight, really tight 90-degree corners in the top of the city. You know, like the paddock area is all down, like sort of where the ferry port is. You know, all on built land. But as you go down all there and then back up to the city, I was gonna jump over the freaking wall because I had to hit the wall, and I sort of want to throw the bike in, and it really was tire problems, you know, just not being used to it. And so you just couldn't get, you know, brake, steering, get on the gas, couldn't do it. So I ended up having to hit the wall. So trying to throw it sideways, I ended up stoving the wheel into the pipes and everything. And I was gonna jump the wall. Thank goodness I didn't, because it was actually an overpass. So it was like 3 stories down to a flat, you know, road. It was, you know, it was an overpass intersection is why it was so tight and the walls were so close. So thank God I didn't jump over the wall and, you know, I sort of just hit the bales and everything and jumped on the inside. But I thought I needed a parachute for that one. But I love the Macau. I love the experience. And it sounds kind of crazy but I didn't mind it. I don't mind it, you know, but really, you know, it's not the responsible thing to do when you're children and everything in your life and everything, but I would have gone back many times. And it's just contractual obligations have always kind of held me from it. And I kind of wish I could do that because Henry and Mike Tremblay were always, they're just such great hosts. And I had a great time, you know, as those people have been really good, as Steve McLaughlin, World Superbike, you know, and founding member of Superbike and States. These world promoters they've always been really great to me. So, yeah, love Henry to go and going to Macau. And
Yeah.
go.
And Steve, before we reminisced about your years at Macau, 1989, you win the 3 championships here in Canada. You're impressive at World Superbike in Mexico. Was that what allowed you to sign with Yoshimura Suzuki for 1990, starting at Daytona?
Yes, yeah. And, you know, the thing is, I had to come down and ride for him or whatever. And, you know, there was a bit of testing and, you know, the bikes didn't have inverted forks, you know, and I was trying those. And they liked the input that I gave back on things, to try these changes and give something back. So they negotiated to sign me up. And they didn't have a second rider yet. I think, yeah, it was at Willow, and that's when Poland crashed. And it took me about 45 minutes to find his toes in the gravel trap up in turn 4 at Willow. I mean, it was quite an experience that in itself with Poland losing his toes there. But so we went through that testing and, yeah, signed up for that. But, you know, they ended up hunting down Miguel as well. And what you got to realize is in '89, Scott Russell, I think, lost the championship to Jamie James, a very close U.S. championship. But those riders couldn't get paid. And I think they even had to put money back, the prize money back, half of it, or some of these deals. You know, it was really winning prize money in Canada was better than racing in the States in the latest of 80s, if you can believe that. And, you know, I negotiated a small salary, a small contract. Yoshimura hated paying that. Suhiro Watanabe is very traditional Japanese. They're the right way, and not a lot of, you know, but I bag on Suhiro Watanabe, who is, you know, worked under Pops Yoshimura's Fujio, and then America is Suhiro Watanabe. Love Don Sakakura, who's, you know, still in place as race management now, but he just hated the fact he had to give you $1 to show up. So I got that, and then Alan LaBrosse had some words with me, and, you know, he made sure Miguel got paid. And, you know, I wish Alan would have done my contract, because I went into Daytona, you know, things were going good for me. Life was good, you know, like I was doing great. I was pretty stoked on riding and all in, and, you know, like 100% all in, you know, relatively healthy. We go to Daytona, and, you know, like we used to have to qualify by 2 50-mile heat races. Now it's all time qualifying by electronic, what do you call timers?
Transponders.
Yeah, them damn transformers, transponders. So I wanted a soft because, you know, my outlap on start outlaps are great. My second, third, fourth laps are always kind of lousy. So I wanted to go with a soft tire. And back then we had a choice of tires. Like today, well, not today, but as we got in the end of Daytona, tires were just, everybody had the same thing. It's just so risky. So anyways, I chose that. Well, there was a hard tire put on the bike, because that to them wasn't the right choice. Nobody told me that. So I scrubbed, went out the first lap, woof, high side, shattered my ankle. So, you know, it's a life-changing ankle injury, you know, not quite as bad as Frank Mrazek, but you feel it every day, every minute, every day. And so it took me 8 weeks to come back to that. 10 weeks, I think I rode, you know, casted it, taped it, air cast, splint. Just couldn't use the rear brake pedal anymore, which really screws up your riding. Came back to the new Loudon racetrack, finished 6th, but Chandler was on a tear, you know, and they always had something more than the rest of the guys. And he actually lapped right up to me at 6th. And they told me when I got out, you know, after the race, they told me to leave my leathers in the truck. And I was like, you're kidding me. And that was the way of saying you're dismissed. And they can get away with it because you would sign your contract, because all I wanted to do was be a racer. I didn't know about being famous. I didn't give a damn about any of that. I just wanted to be a racer. And well, different than kids today, because I didn't start riding bikes till I was 15. So you had this kid dream, want to be this, sign a bad deal. And then, you know, then we got onto on the phone, and he wanted me to come back. He realized it wasn't a bad finish that I had for a brand new racetrack. The asphalt's coming apart, and I'm totally still wounded for a couple of years. Anyways, all that being said, he asked me to come and ride, and I literally, you know, you shouldn't say these things, but I literally told him to GFYS. You shouldn't do that. But the one thing is, you learn, you do burn bridges, but if you do, you know, push as hard as some people and you're in it as long as, it comes full circle. You know, that door will open up again, but then Nobby is not in it and sees me all with the same guy, and he's, why are you so angry? I said, well, you know, anyways. So, I mean, we're great friends now. I mean, every time we see each other. But yeah, Yoshimura was a short stint for me, and it was really one of those really bad deals, unfortunately. But, you know, 8 years later, I made good on it. So with
Yeah. And Steve, so you come back to Canada in 1990. You managed to salvage the 250 Grand Prix championship, I think, that year, 2 years in a row. And then the next 3 years, you focus on racing here in Canada with Kawasaki. You win your second, third, and fourth Canadian Superbike championship. Did that set the stage for going back to the U.S. and racing with a number of teams starting, I guess, in '94?
Well, you did miss one thing. I was teammate with the great legendary Freddie Spencer. No, anyway,
On Two Brothers.
the
On Two Brothers, right.
Yeah. So things went really like such an aggressive, angry little guy. You know, I don't like being. It's funny, you know, when someone's smearing over, trying to. Yeah, I declined riding for Yoshimura, and that was a dumb thing to do because it takes a while to get back into a factory deal because you're only as good as your last race, and that's it. This is a horrible way to make a living or to raise a family. It's just not a smart way to go. Do it for fun and get what you can out of it. If you make some money, good. Terrible business. So I met up with Harold Surian, Deese Matursky, Deese, and Dave Murphy, because Dave, you know, done a lot with Darren James in the past that was instrumental to me, to helping me when I was younger. So I got with them and I picked up your 250 and, you know, we had no parts with it, didn't run. I picked up a box and mathematically I joined the season halfway. And if I won every qualifier and every race, I could beat Cornwell, who's leading the championship, by 2 points. So we set about to do that. And so we did that. And that was great. And the pink bike with Weldray just wasn't good. And then Kawasaki in 1991 came along and they wanted to get back into racing. And they had a ZX7 thing and they're heavy to promote that. And so we started with that. And, you know, it was rough because Harold, Harold's the way he is, Harold Surian, one of the best. He just, the way he treats metal and holds things, I just got so much appreciation for him. I know he's not trying to make big numbers, doesn't want to know what a dyno is, but it's the way the man just puts, you see the way he puts it together. Harold was, you know, we got an argument. I think Kawasaki put up like a $10,000 July Shannonville purse, and he didn't show up to the races. Michael, you know, we had to send Dave Murphy back to get everything that was green. The motor wasn't in the bike. Tony Russell, Mike Taylor, and everybody put my super bike together. Didn't get to qualify on it. And I was one tooth off on my gearing because I never really got to ride the long track yet on that bike. I lost to Lindley, and Lindley banked on that, which Fast Company and everything. That was great for Lindley Clark. And so I was rather mad with that, but I won the championships for Kawasaki in Canada for the next 3 years. But in 1991, I got to ride with Freddie Spencer on the Two Brothers program, which later became Arian Racing, a satellite Honda HRC team. And I got to ride the RC30s, which I love that bike. Little vague in the front wheel feel, but I love that bike. And I was doing the testing for Bridgestone, and that was tough. But in 91, at the end of the year, I got to go to Kansas, and I got to race Freddie Spencer got me a set of Michelins. You know, they weren't special, but I didn't have to ride Bridgestones. Arian, the brothers, let me do that. And Freddie did pass me, but I had a little go with Scott Russell with it. I got on the box, third place, and that was pretty impressive because it's not really the same, anything near what Freddie had, but it was still good bikes. But it's just a way different engine configuration. Ruben will tell you all about that stuff. I don't know. I don't work on them. And then, so 2 years with them, and I had a chance. I was up against Miguel. And Miguel, you know, they're dropping the valve seats with the Commonwealth Racing and higher compression. I'm 30 to 40 pounds heavier than Miguel at the time. He's got better bike. I'm on Bridgestone tires. I got a championship superbike in Canada that I'm leading the chase in. I'm second in the points with Miguel, who at that time, that little dweeb, he's pound for pound Miguel, like through the 90s, pound for pound, simply one of the greatest racers in the world. Like, you know, I know the guy is a little bugger because he won't give me a Daytona Rolex pole position watch. He has 3. I take it out of him every time I talk to him. But Miguel was really that good. So to be 40 pounds heavier on a 600, to be on unchartered tires, you know, and to be already in second place, a really stupid thing for me to do is to not ride for Arian. But the Canada deal with Weldray was my deal. You know, they you know, Arian, of course, it also, the deals in Canada I have are always my deal. But I thought that was more important for me. So it was a long road back. And then I rode, because I was beating Muzzy's guys, like I think Smith and Mike Smith, but Miguel was the guy and hard to beat. So in, I think 92 and 93, I said to Arians, because they wouldn't even pay me my contingency money they owed me, a nickel and dime, $200 on the exhaust pipe money. So they, the Arians are the Arians, they're cheap. But he is, he's a great team management, Kevin is. So I told him, I says, in 93, I says, I'm not going to ride for you. I say, I can do better on my own stuff in Canada. I'm not going to ride for you. I'm going to ride my own bike and do better because I buy my tires. And Kevin Arian just said, scoffs at me and laughs at me. He says, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Yeah, it was. But, I missed the first race, and every single race I entered, I got second or third. As a privateer on what's supposed to be a production Cowie, built by Harold, we'd come home with bike in pieces all the time. Harold would hate me for it. Harold didn't go to the States with me. So I did it all on my own, and it was, I think I was burned out at the end of the year in Sonoma. I think I got fourth. Pete and Cal sweated, paid my fuel one way, so I decided to go. But in hindsight, I was tired. I shouldn't have done that. I should have just called it. And so the next year was Muzzy open the door for me. And that was really good, but it's really bad because—
Steve, this is 1995 now. You're with Muzzy.
94, yeah, first year Muzzy.
Okay.
2 years, but Rob was a really hard guy to get along with. Rob did not listen to what I was saying, it goes down to, oh God, I had problems with the bikes and trying to get them to understand that a dyno's good, sure, great, but the bikes are crapping out, and they had KHI jet kits, and I said, just use a dyno jet kit or a factory jet kit, but not Kawasaki Heavy Industry jet kits, because back then World Superbike had, the engines were built in 600 racing, so they think those parts are better, and they weren't. And I was always seconds and thirds and just struggling so hard trying to tell Rob that we can't win if you don't listen to us. We got to figure out what's wrong with the bikes, because they start out okay and then they just go crap after 2 laps. He says, if the bike's good enough to get second, it's the rider. I said, jackass. So anyways, we go to Loudon, and I'm not doing well because the bike starts crapping out, but I'm moving on Miguel, who's leading. And we come into the thing, we had a red flag, and I know we're going to go out, and I'm screaming, put some, wet towels on, between the tank and get this tank cooled off. We got to pull the 2 inside needles. We got to lean the 2 inside out. Bike's running so rich, I can't accelerate. And, Larry Kano was there and Rob Muzzy, and he says, no, man, no, you're done. You're not making changes. Because I make changes. I drive mechanics crazy, but I'm not wrong. And I says, you're right. We're done, Rob. I'm not touching it. Go start the bike. It won't start. I says, it won't start. He says, what do you mean? I said, you're not listening. I said, drain those focals. It won't start. Go start it. It will not start. It doesn't run. They said bullshit and everything. So anyway, Rob, Larry Kano goes, can't get it going, pushing me up and down pit lane. It's only 95 degrees there. And then Kevin Arian brings out, because they had the twins, the rollers back then, brings out the rollers, they're bumping that thing. And, I basically took my helmet, earplugs out, put them in the helmet, put the gloves in there, and looked at Rob and says, maybe we'll start listening to me now. Walked off, and next race or whatever, I put it on the pole, I think, for the last race of the year. It all means nothing, very hard guys to deal with when you're a second string rider, except for working with Honda in the States, very difficult positions to be in the States, whether you're with Mladen in Yoshimura, or Poland with Yoshimura in the beginning, or Miguel, very difficult positions being a second rider. And, Miguel basically ruined my life, I'll have you know. So he's, back then he was just that good. What can I say? So yeah, a lot of interesting stuff, a lot of hard stuff. And again, 2 years with Muzzy, and I just had to walk from him. And then we went to Honda. The best team I ever worked for.
And those were, Steve, I know we're coming up on the close of the show here shortly. We will go a little bit over time because we still want to get a bunch of stuff in. Then you go to the Camel Honda team, and then 1998, you finally win that first AMA championship in the super sport class. Take us through that year.
Well, sadly, winning that championship is just nothing I like to brag about too much, because we started that TL project, and now I have a cult following. But the TL was kind of, it was an interesting bike, but I never rode it properly, because I rode it screaming the engine, not torquing it, because it's too hard to get in the gas. And so that was a really fun, it actually started off to be pretty fun, because Yosh hired me, Don Sakakura was the chief, and Mladen was the key for this and everything, because they were working on traction control with a Marbazaz. They were cheating 4 or 5 years before traction control was legal. I mean, Mladen's championships are all questionable up until the Ben Spies times, where traction was allowed. As are some of Jordan's in Canada with the Kawasaki kit stuff before anybody, but whatever. So the thing is that TL, I came in for a tire, and I think I yelled, I don't know, like Chris or Yuji Kikuchi, I says, "Is that tire hot?" It's because the Q tire has got to be on a warmer for 45 minutes. And they slapped me on the back, said, "Go," and the axle wrench was left on. They weren't finished. The tire had 10 minutes on a warmer, didn't know, And I went out into the horseshoe, and I was trying to stay out of the way. I wasn't even in the horseshoe. I was just going to skirt around, turn around backwards, spit me off. I landed feet, butt, and the back of my head. It's about a 45-minute dirt nap. I woke up in the Halifax Center. My suit was already off of me, and I knocked myself out so stupidly bad. But I rode the next day, and if you miss out, you're not going to build a championship. I don't know the results. I think I got a 5th or 4th, but you got to build on it. And to say that I knew that you have such a massive head trauma, and to go through that is just something I'd never have. Nothing's worth that, because like look at what happened to Steve, the kid from Burnaby out here at Shannonville. He crashed on the Friday or Saturday, and they went into the back straight and just rode off, and he had an aneurysm. Because it's these head injuries are something you gotta really respect more, and I never did, and I've had too many, and that just causes trouble in life later. But that's how I built on that championship. And then because of this silly watercraft accident in '96, I was suffering bowel obstructions, and going into the very last race at Las Vegas, I got to beat Chandler. I got to be 5th if Chandler wins to win the championship. But I had a bowel obstruction that, I was at Whistler. My buddies are all racing a mountain bike race up there, and I ate wrong, checked into the hospital on Sunday night, Nastrogas, NG tube up your nose, morphine, gravel, until Wednesday. They pulled the tube out, get on a plane Thursday at 11 o'clock to Vegas, 15 pounds shy. And I just got to get on the bike and ride around. And people looking at you, "Hey, you're so lean, you look ripped. You've been working out." Oh, yeah. Try to eat a cracker, try to get a little Gatorade, get a little Ensure. Don't tell anybody. And it's funny because I raced, I got up to Chandler, I was passing Chandler, and then I just waved him by and waved him. He gave me a really respectful wave, and I got my championship. But to brag about building on it when you have such a massive head injury like that is just really stupid. And it costs you down the road. These things bug you. Like in, I think, '03, when I rode Diablo Suzuki, I had a broken kneecap because of the Honda, engine came apart at Shannonville in the first race of the year or whatever. I can't remember. but I misshifted, and I don't know if you remember in a 600 race, but I went gutter ball and I smashed my head so bad. But I stayed in the. I told Richard Italia, you know, we're in Quebec at Dumontet, and I said to the team owner Richard Italia and Eddie Vernet, you know, and Pete, I said, I'm gonna stay and just gonna lay it out. I've won championships doing these things, and I said this is gonna cost me, but that gave Picot his first championship because I got no points, and you know, but you know, you gotta. Gee, there's a dog. You gotta.
Steve, I think your canine friend there is saying we're getting really close to the end of our track announcer's notebook 1 hour. Steve, there's a lot of history to cover. That's your young daughter.
Yeah, it's Arabella.
Okay, the whole family's joined us here on Track Announcer Notebook. Steve, we're gonna wrap things up. There's a bunch more I want to talk to you about, including the back-to-back championships in 2000 and 2001 on the RC51, as well as those final years on the Harley Davidson. But
I love driving for Dealey's. That family still does me so well. Darren James, Don James's dad. You know, again, you know, one of the greatest sponsors you can ever have. I mean, I really like that they let me ride with Scott Miller in 07. I ride deals in the States in 07, and I got to ride Yamaha's, you know, because it got me winning again. Unfortunately, Yamaha didn't listen that we need to do testing before that year because we would have won championships easy that year. But there was troubles with the bikes. And Scott Miller being teamed up with him was a great thing. But yeah, there's so much, you know, but ending the career with Dealey's was really good. It was a lot of fun for me. But, you know, I just, like you say, there's a lot to talk about. Got hurt too much, you know, knocking around, hard times. But still, everybody goes through a lot of stuff.
well, Steve, we want to thank you for coming on board Track Announcer's Notebook. Maybe we'll have you on here in a few more weeks to get into a little bit more detail, those final few years of your racing career. And I was talking to Daryl Fletcher to say, assuming you get inducted into the BC Sports Hall of Fame, maybe we'll get out to BC next May for that induction, as we were there a couple of years ago for the Motorcycle Hall of Fame induction.
That would be really honorable. Yeah,